Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. I'm really excited about today's monitor review because the product I'm looking at falls into my favorite category, and that is affordable but decent gaming monitors. Lots of companies try and target this market segment, but it's difficult to come away with a winner. But I think that LG might have just managed it with their 32GK650F. This monitor is 32 inches in size and packs a 1440p resolution with a 144Hz refresh rate, so it falls into that golden zone for modern gaming. But on top of that, it uses VA technology, which is popular with gamers and perhaps the best for this type of display, and crucially it's flat, which will please the curved display haters. LG hasn't bothered with any HDR stuff here. This is just your standard 1440p high refresh monitor, and as a result, it's retailing right now for just $350 US. This doesn't make it the outright cheapest 1440p 144Hz display on the market. You can often find others for around the $320, maybe $330 mark, like the Viotech GN27DB and GN32DB, but there is genuinely lots to like about the 32GK650F, which I'll get into in the performance section. I've made a lot of LG monitor reviews over the past few months, so if you've watched any of those, this design will be very familiar to you. The 32GK650F uses LG's current Ultra Gear style, which includes a simple V-shaped stand made from black plastic, a basic front panel design with slim bezels on three sides, and again, a simple black plastic rear, which I think looks pretty good. There's a few red highlights here giving the design a bit of additional interest, but it's not overly gamer aesthetic, and there's no RGB LEDs here, which I kind of appreciate. Despite its simple design visually, LG has included a lot of functionality. The stand is fully height adjustable and also supports tilting, swiveling, and even pivoting, so you can use this monitor in a portrait orientation. The sturdiness of the stand is average, but unlike a lot of other budget monitors in this class, it actually supports a good range of motion. The ports are easily accessible on the rear panel, although cable management can be a little tricky. The main ports are DisplayPort and two HDMI ports plus a headphone jack. No USB hub here, although like the omission of RGB LEDs, I'm fine with this being cut to save costs. The monitor does require an external power brick though. LG's Ultra Gear line seems to mostly use directional toggles for controlling the on-screen menu, which again is an advantage this monitor has over some alternatives, and there's also quite a few handy features to be found within, like a backlight strobing option, some cheap features like crosshairs, and black level adjustments. For gamers, this monitor has a great feature set headlined by a 2560 by 1440 resolution and a maximum refresh rate of 144Hz. It also has FreeSync support with low frame rate compensation, and it's fully compatible with NVIDIA's GPUs, although FreeSync is disabled by default, so make sure you enable it. Some of the absolute cheapest monitors with these specs do not include adaptive sync, so having it here is definitely welcome and basically a requirement, I think, for any modern gaming display. Response times for a VA panel are better than average as well. There are several response time modes, but the default fast option is the best, with faster introducing a bit too much overshoot. Still, with the fast mode, we're looking at a greater gray average response of 6.50 milliseconds, which is faster than the required 6.94 milliseconds to transition fully at a 144Hz refresh rate. Aside from a few particularly slow transitions, this panel is properly capable of a 144Hz refresh around 80% of the time, which is better than average for a VA display. In fact, when looking over the charts, you can see that of the 32-inch 1440p 144Hz VA monitors I reviewed, and there have been a few, it's quite a popular product type, the 32GK650F is the fastest. The average response time for this type is 7.7 milliseconds, so about 1 millisecond faster than expected. It's a great result for a VA and puts it within IPS territory. Input lag is also decent, coming in at 3.3 milliseconds, which is within the normal bracket we see for gaming monitors. This gives an overall latency of below 10 milliseconds, which is what I like to see. LG does list a typical contrast ratio for this display of 3000 to 1, although in my testing I recorded more like 2400 to 1, which is a fair bit lower, but not unusual for this sort of VA. In fact, with this result, it still sits around its competitors, which all slot in below 3000 to 1 as well. It just seems this set of specs leads to a lower contrast, or at least the panels being made with these specs have a lower contrast. That said, even at 2400 to 1, the contrast ratio is still at least double a typical IPS and will still give you the contrast benefits of this technology. As for brightness, 320 nits is fine for most viewers, particularly as there's no HDR support here. As for colors, well, this is just your standard sRGB compliant panel, so there's no wide gamut support here. Although that does make it easier to work with in most cases, as outside of HDR modes, your standard content is mastered for sRGB, so to avoid oversaturation, you do want an sRGB monitor. Default out-of-the-box performance, well, it isn't amazing though, and that's largely down to incorrect grayscale performance. A white point of 7840K, which balloons out to an average of 8120K over the grayscale range, means this monitor ships with a cold blue tint. Some users like this, but for it to be correct, you actually want a warmer 6500K white point, so a grayscale Delta E average of 5.05 isn't surprising here. It's a similar story with saturation performance. With a cold white point, you can see that the rest of the color points have been translated, so everything has been dragged colder than expected. We get a Delta E average here of 3.26 with particularly poor blue, cyan and magenta performance, and you'll see similar numbers with the color checker test. Luckily, the incorrect white point can be corrected through a few tweaks in the on-screen menu. For my unit, I set the user color controls to red 50, green 43, and blue 34, along with a brightness of 61 for approximately 200 nits. These settings may not apply perfectly to every 32GK650F due to panel variance, but it should bring things a lot closer to accurate. With these settings applied alone, so no formal calibration just yet, the CCT curve had drastically improved to an average of 6855K, which led to a grayscale Delta E average of just 1.66, which is pretty damn accurate for just a few setting tweaks. This helped out a lot with saturation, leading to a Delta E average of 1.39, and color checker, which improves to 1.53. With averages below 2.0 across the board, this sort of performance is pretty accurate. From here, you could go and perform a proper calibration, which does tighten things up further. It sets even better gamma and so on. But for most users, I think these basic tweaks will suffice, especially if your model has shipped with a noticeable blue tint. If you want my calibrated ICC profile, as always, that is provided for our Patreon members. Lastly, we have uniformity, which as expected for a VA panel is a touch on the mediocre side. The center channel is good enough, but as you look to either edge, there's a bit of deviance relative to the center. Nothing drastic, it is somewhat noticeable, but for gaming it's not a big deal and you won't get much better from a competing VA monitor. All up, the 32GK650F is my new favorite affordable, high refresh gaming monitor, and that's not a crown that I give out lightly or easily. I've spoken before about how 1440p 144Hz is my favorite monitor hardware for gaming right now. It's that great combination of resolution and refresh rate that's achievable with modern GPU tech, and the 32GK650F delivers that with the best feature set at a great price. Previously, I used to recommend monitors like the Viotech GN32DB or the Pixio PX329 in this category, the Viotech option being curved and about $330, while the Pixio is flat and $350. But with the 32GK650F also slotting in at $350, it simply offers more than the alternatives at that price, and I'd have no hesitation in spending an extra $20 if required. Specifically, the 32GK650F has faster response times, which reduces blur and provides a true 144Hz experience, unlike the Pixio, which is advertised as 165Hz, but really can't deliver 144Hz, let alone that higher refresh rate. It's still a large 32-inch VA panel with good contrast and a flat design, which I feel is better than curved alternatives, and it comes with a better stand that's height and pivot adjustable, which neither Viotech nor Pixio offer. Crucially, this monitor is also much easier to find than Viotech or Pixio monitors, which are only sold in North America. It's not as good value here in Australia, where it retails for $600, but it should still be a great option in a number of territories globally. It's not a perfect monitor, but there's no glaring flaws here, so when you're offering the best value proposition, it's really hard not to recommend it. If you are interested in this monitor or any of the others I've talked about in this review, as always, there are links to check current prices in the description below. Subscribe for more monitor reviews, always getting new ones into test. Consider supporting us on Patreon for access to our Discord community, behind the scenes videos and more, and I'll catch you in the next one.